So I'm a fourth-year grad student at UC Irvine, and I'm pretty lucky in that most of the senior researchers in my lab and at the university, they've been fairly active in the open science movement. So they've been liaising with Center for Open Science, they've been developing tools for better statistical practice, so I had a lot of exposure very early on to the open science movement. And also Bayesian practices. So early on in my grad career, I decided that every single project I do during grad school, I'm going to pre-register it, I'm going to publish all the materials, I'm going to publish the data, and publish the analysis code, in addition to obviously publishing it as a paper at the end. Yeah, so I think one of the things that's very important in advancing the open science movement is just normalizing it. So being like, this is just how science is done.
Yeah.
So with my research assistant who worked with me on a project on evaluating muscle testing, which is an alternative medicine diagnostic technique that has a lot of controversial evidence for and against, we decided to do a very involved planned analysis of that to see if it actually has any validity or not.
Okay.
And we pre-registered that study. We have published all of the data, including the raw and processed data, and my RA was totally on board because she's just starting out, and if you explain that this has value, this is best practice for the field, then they want to do that.
Yeah.
They want to get into that. I've noticed in going to conferences that it's a little bit more difficult to get people on board where they see the value because they've heard about things like the reproducibility crisis. They've heard about what happens when you don't do these things. And they see the value like, yeah, we should pre-register research. We should publish our data. But if we ask them, have you published your data? Often it's, no, I haven't done it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just getting people into the habit of it early. And possibly even forcing people's hand a little bit. So there are some journals now, like eLife is a good example of this. It's a relatively new journal, and they require that you publish your data in order to publish a paper. So I think that'll get the older generation on hand, people who are junior faculty and senior faculty.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this varies a little bit by field. I think in psychology, it's just, I think some people still don't know what tools are out there. So when I pre-registered my first study, I thought it would be a big to-do, that I'd have to work for a couple of weeks on it and all of this and figuring out where to do it. Do I have to talk to a journal or do I just put it online? But once I found Open Science Framework, it's basically just the IRB approval.
Right.
So if you can do IRB approval, you can do pre-registration really easily. So for psychology, I think it's still just an awareness issue and getting people into the habit. But I'm actually starting to edge into the neuroscience field. And I think that's another next frontier for open science, is talking to the clinical people, talking to neuroscience, all of the adjacent fields to social science, because they have very different concerns. So for example, in psychology, our data sets are very small. They're small, they're very well defined. But if you talk to a neuroscientist, it can be up to a terabyte of data. Who's going to store that and store it in perpetuity? There's a lot of challenges there that we have yet to talk about, just because it doesn't come up as often in social science, but it's critical for open science across the board. So first of all, I guess I would say that I think it's just fun to be a part of the movement, because I like chatting people up at conferences, and especially since I'm also a Bayesian, I get to be a dual evangelist. I get to be like, hey, have you thought about using a Bayes factor in your research? And also asking people about open science and hearing the diversity of reactions from, yeah, I want to get more involved in that. How do I actually do it? To, I don't know about that. I just really like talking to people about it. So it's personally fun for me. As a computational person personally, one of the things I'm most excited about is the increased sharing of data and seeing that across fields, because there's so many different ways to look at data. And I really think that it's just a time thing, that we do what seems to be the most natural analysis, and normally that there's no right or wrong. Well, there are some wrong ways, but there are many different ways that you can look at data and dig in and uncover do new exploratory analyses, generate new hypotheses. From one data set, you can actually get many different avenues from where to go. So I think by being more open about materials, about data, about process, we open up new research questions and can actually uncover more in the end.